Welcome to the tacopodcast. I'm Crystal.
I'm Will.
You're our audience. Welcome. I apologize. We had 2 weeks of no posting and radio silence from me. I apologize for that. We had life happen, and that's no excuse to leave you hanging high and dry. And I will do better next time.
Okay.
So, today's topic, if you're paying attention to anything that's happening in the U.S., you could probably guess that the United States is on fire in multiple locations.
Literally.
And that has touched us in our town as well. Our friends and our family are all wrapped up in this in one way or another. So we are going to touch bases on some of those things and discuss what would be the best way to phrase that, hon?
I don't know what your thought pattern is, so.
No one knows what my thought
Yeah.
pattern is. Not
Oh my
even
God.
me, and it's my
Can't
thought
tell you
pattern.
what the best way to put it since I have no idea where you're going with it. All right. So let's just stick with our script here.
Okay, we're going to
Let's
stick
go
with
with
our
that.
script. We wrote down some bullet
Yeah.
points. Or I would have written down bullet points. Bill just put them on a piece of paper. There's no bullet points anywhere.
Well, we don't want bullets right now. So the last thing we need is bullets.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I want to start this out actually by saying if you don't know what's going on and if you are confused, that is okay.
Everyone is.
There is a ton of information. It's coming at you from so many different places. And it's really, really easy to be confused about what's going on. So do not feel bad if you wake up any given day and just go, what the actual hell is happening right now? And don't feel bad if you think you know what's going on and then all of a sudden you don't know what's going on. And that's one of the things we're going to touch on, actually. The first thing is that there's a lot of misinformation happening. And I'm not... I might later. I don't know. I'm not going to try not to speculate on reasons for that. I think a lot of it, honestly, is just a genuine misunderstanding of what's happening. I think that, we're humans. That happens. We hear things, we see things, we misinterpret it, and we're going to go with what we think. So I'm going to choose to believe that a lot of that happens not maliciously. So one of the big things that's going around, I'm sure that a lot of people have heard, is Antifa is showing up. It's a huge rumor that's everywhere.
What is Antifa?
Antifa is a very loose organization. It stands for anti-fascist, and it's a loose, or it's not even really an organization. It's just a group of people with the one common ideology of fighting fascism, and for a lot of them it takes a completely different look. Some people are out there in masks and roaming around looking to beat the shit out of people. Some people aren't. Unfortunately, people that want to cause violence will always get headlines.
Are they doing anything else? What is Antifa known for? I guess we'll start with that.
Antifa is known, generally, at least in this area, for opposing some of the white supremacist groups that we have in the area. They will show up as counter-protests to rallies and things like that. One of the problems with Antifa is that a lot of times where they show up, violence follows. In those kinds of situations, it's hard to determine if they were a precipitating factor or not. But as much as I support the idea, I do have to assume in a lot of cases they were the precipitating factor for the violence.
Okay. Are they just good people with bad intentions?
No, I mean, what is a good person with a bad intention?
What's a bad person with good intentions?
I know a couple of people who identify as members of the movement, and they are good people. They feel very strongly they feel like they're protecting other people. But as we'll touch on later on, sometimes when you feel like you're protecting other people, you lose sight of that, and you wind up hurting the very people that you were trying to protect.
So who's the is there a group or is there anyone that we can look at in the news and say this person is most likely Antifa or another group out there who is primarily gathering people to actually cause property damage, loot, and riot?
Um, yes and no. It seems from what I've researched that those groups they're varying from place to place. Some areas it does look like Antifa members have shown up and started looting and rioting. In a lot of other cases, it appears as though those incidents were caused by white supremacist groups. Proud Boys showed up in a couple of locations and tried to break stuff and got run off. Um, and then there's also, as we touched upon earlier, there's a ton of rumors. You'll see posts from people all over the place. Oh, I saw Antifa here. Oh, I saw the Proud Boys over here. Oh, here's this. Oh, here's that. And 9 times out of 10, if it is accompanied by any kind of visual documentation, if you go to TinEye and you do an image search, that visual documentation does not match what's being said.
It's like the visual. Not using that actual search itself. I did a Google search on when they said that there was 3 busloads of Antifa members
Mm-hmm.
being moved into our community to protest and to picket. When I did just a basic Google search, I found out that the picture that they were using was from a rally that started around the Rodney King beating, and the outrage over that. And they were using the same images of buses and
Mm-hmm.
people getting off those buses, but they weren't necessarily Antifa because I don't know when Antifa really
It's
started.
recent. Antifa's very recent.
But yeah, and that goes back to their first point of misinformation. Just because it's becoming from a mainstream media outlet and source doesn't necessarily mean that they're telling you and giving you the actual real facts in this. A lot of media outlets are hyping up the actual rallies, destruction, the violence, and everything else because that's what gets you and me and her to tune in the evening news. And it's also selling newspapers. Yes, we've always known that violence and drugs and depravity sells the evening news. If you put stories of just puppies on the television, only a select number of us would tune in. Yeah, us too for sure. I mean, I'm sure you would tune in as well to watch nothing but puppy stories and ones of baby kittens. But for the rest of the world, and unfortunately, that's how society is at. TMZ and these other talk and tabloid television shows and Inside Editions and your morning Fox Newses that hype up events. They need something to report, and so they're going to hype these events up to the extreme as they can. Am I saying that there's no destruction? No, I'm not saying that at all. We've seen the rioting, the looting, the burnings happen all over the United States and in the world to some extent over what's going on. So
Yep. Yeah. I've got friends, Australia, the UK, and they're reporting similar things happening. Um, the view from outside the U.S. of what's going on in our country isn't flattering to us, but I think, I think it's a good thing. Um, allowing a social wound to fester is never gonna let it heal. You gotta open that sucker up. You gotta cut it open. You gotta let it drain, and then it can get better.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but go ahead.
No, I like to use the medical analogies, man. Slice
Well,
that
I
sucker.
don't necessarily believe that we should do. That's what we should do. In order to grasp it. How did these rallies start? And why is everyone upset? Are they upset over the death of one individual, or is this a larger issue?
It's a larger issue, and for every person that you talk to, they're gonna have a different reason for why they're doing what they're doing, regardless of where they're at. If they're at a protest or if they're at a counter protest, everybody has a reason for being there, and oftentimes it's personal. And While I might disagree with the counter protests, and I do, I'm a firm supporter of the protesters. If you've seen my personal social media, it has been full of stuff. But you cannot tell somebody what their personal experience is. And so if you talk to counter protesters, engage them with love and compassion, you can get an idea of why they're there. And if you and validate them, that's what most people are just looking for. They're just looking for validation of how they feel. Whether or not you agree doesn't mean that you can't meet them as a human. You know.
Okay, I don't discount the people protesting. We have the here in America, we have the right to protest and to have our voices heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that right now we're looking at a perfect storm, as in people have been shut in their houses for so long. We haven't been able to communicate. We haven't been able to gather. So all this, I think, played into this perfect storm of the rallies and everything else that has been in protests that have been happening.
That's true.
What
That's
I
true.
don't believe, is rightful is the looting and the rioting and the destruction of property and assaults upon people who are not the 4 officers who took part, in this murder of Floyd.
And I agree. But like we've talked beforehand, and Bill and I have, he was a little bit horrified to realize that he was married to somebody who's a little bit of an anarchist.
Oh, extremely. I wouldn't say a little bit.
I understand. I'm never going to want to understand 100%, but I understand the frustration of watching for decades as people do things the right way and nothing changes. But after Bill and I had our first conversation where I told him to embrace his anarchist heart and burn everything to the ground and start over again, I realized after doing a little bit of introspection, I think that's because I still believe in the inherent goodness of people. I feel like without the constraints of structure, people are still going to do the right thing. So to me, it doesn't strike me as a bad thing because I truly think that people will rise up and they will do the right thing. And I also realize I'm probably wrong. So there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance there while I'm trying to rectify my inherent belief that humans are ultimately good and will rise and be better and do good things with the visual evidence I have to the contrary. Still working on that.
Well, I don't think people are inherently bad. I just think that your vision on everything else and your perspective on the rest of it is slightly skewed in the wrong direction.
And it very well could be.
So
I am always open to changing my mind when presented with disparate information.
all right, so the next one.
The next one. So the reason we started talking about the misinformation campaigns is, and Antifa specifically, is there's a lot of rumors going around. Every single town got the same basic rumor. Somebody heard from a reliable source or was told by an informant in law enforcement that thousands of Antifa were coming to your town to loot and riot. Either Antifa is huge and just comprised of hundreds of thousands of members across the country, or they possess the ability to teleport. And both of those are terrifying. I get it. I'd be scared too.
I want teleportation.
Right? Who doesn't? I want donuts. No, I got donuts. So, where did this come from? I don't know. I haven't found a root to where it came from. The rumors all seem to hold the same basic template, so I'm guessing they came from the same place.
Well, I mean, it's probably something that's being shared on social media.
Mm-hmm.
As wrong as it very well be in a lot of cases, it was so far off base.
And it did, unfortunately, at least in our state, lead to harm. A family was camping in the town of Forks. It's in the news. You can look that up. As they're coming out of the gas station after having gotten supplies for their camping trip, they're accosted by a number of people in vehicles demanding to know who they are, where they're from, are they Antifa? The family's like, fuck no, we're just camping. Leave us alone. Finally get everybody to leave them alone. They get in their van. They head to their camping spot, and they were followed. While they're trying to camp, they hear gunshots, they hear chainsaws, which, let's be honest, is the start of every horror movie originating in the States. Hopefully they didn't have somebody who was blonde with them, because that just means you know something bad is happening, because the blonde one always goes first in every single one of those movies. Anyways, they decide, oh, fuck this shit, we're out. They get in the car, they get ready to leave. People had purposely felled trees across the road to box the family in. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest. I would probably yeah, it would have been ugly. I would have just blubbered. Probably would have been bad. I would have been absolutely terrified. And as much as I'm kind of making light of that, I can't even begin to imagine how just gut-wrenchingly terrified those people had to be with their family. And now their family is in danger. I would 100% believe that my family was in mortal danger at that moment when I saw those trees and know, holy shit, there's people with guns. They're going to kill my kids. I would have been terrified. There were hikers in the area. They managed to help clear the logs. The people got out. They called the police. One of the news articles I read said that they were detained. I think it was just, I'm hoping it was just an unfortunate choice of words and they weren't actually detained by police. I don't know that I would have stopped. I would have been like, screw your whole entire town. I don't know what's going on here, but, you know, you can go cabin in the woods somebody else. But that's what happens when rumors like this spread. You tell a bunch of people who are confused, they don't know what's going on, they've been trapped in their homes, there's psychological distress, that a group of strangers is coming to destroy your town, and next thing you know, you're the bad guy in the movie.
Okay, well, next one. I don't have much to add to that because I never read about it. Next one.
Building on that same thing, vigilantes versus community groups. So in our area, we have a community group that has banded together to help protect businesses. I both support that and am nervous about it. One of the reasons I was nervous about it is because of what happened later on. A second group formed, piggybacking on the first one. They're using basically the same name, they just changed it by adding a word. And they are blatantly anti-protester. They're making jokes about running people over, referring them to as trash. We have a local politician who's a member of that group who's doing the same thing. People are bringing up concerns to her, and her only answer is Second Amendment. Okay, well, you know what? Everybody lives here. You can't just say Second Amendment. You have to talk to them. Explain to them why it is they feel like you're using the Second Amendment to impede their First Amendment, because there's more amendments. There's a whole bunch of them.
What?
Yeah, I know, right?
Did you know anything more than the first two?
I knew several of them. Wow. Here's one that people often forget: the Third Amendment, non-consensual quartering. A lot of people, maybe you've seen it on Facebook, the Third Amendment rises from the ashes to... they're kicking soldiers who are being non-consensually quartered out of some establishments. Again, some people were mad about that, and then got even more mad when they were reminded that that's actually enshrined in our Constitution, that you can't be forced to host a soldier if you don't want to. Surprise! That's the amendment no one talks about. It's the amendment that never gets invited to the party.
We know the first, second, and fourth.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know there was a third. I'm kidding.
Nobody really invites the Third Amendment to the party.
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about the first, second, and fourth. All right. So, anything more on that one?
I do want to touch on this one. So I've been doing some loose leaf reporting. Basically, it's just screenshots with a little LAT, thrown in.
Are you a reporter?
No, I am not at all. That's why I said loose leaf. I'm just like, oh my god, look at this ass. It's in.
So don't you have to be a reporter to do reporting?
No, you don't.
What? You don't? Oh. Well, do you check all your sources?
You really should. So here's one of the I've shared twice now items that turned out to be factually incorrect. One of them was selectively edited to present the narrative that they wanted. One of them was my own lack of in the group that we discussed earlier, the second group, the vigilante group, the one that's actively looking, and in one case, seeking out people to harass and chase, and I snagged documentation of that before that was purged. I didn't realize that they weren't associated with the first group. Like I said, the name is almost exactly the same, and I fell victim to it. I'm not proud of it, but we don't do better without admitting our faults. I shared information that wasn't true. I posted a redaction. I apologized. And it's easy to be embarrassed. I know I still am. I'm like, I tell people to check their sources all the time, and here I am going, look at this shit. But we don't get better if we don't own that embarrassment.
And like the incident that happened in Forks, and that a lot of people, they see these things online and they don't check the sources at all. They don't see if it was edited to maybe push a narrative that supports that individual who originally posted it, narrative of the situation. And people see it, they're like outraged, so they share it. And people will do this over and over and over and over again, and then finally people are convinced that it is the true event of what took place because they've seen it 50,000 times, on social media, so it must be true. Or maybe it was retweeted, a couple 100,000 times, so it must be true. And when the actual facts of the case are vastly different from what you may have seen in a cut down, edited clip of 1 minute. So, all right. Next.
And on that note, I'd like to touch
fine.
one more.
Whoa, moving on.
If, like me, you find yourself sharing something and then finding out later on that it wasn't true, don't feel bad. Obviously, like I said, I am embarrassed, but it happens to everybody. Don't feel bad if you got taken in.
Okay. You got taken in.
I did, but it's okay.
Next one. And last.
So the last one. So our daughter attended one of the local protests. She got some video from it to share with us. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to have time to edit it in. If so, we might. So she talked to us a little bit about her personal experience there, and she really liked it. She said there was a lot of positive energy. There was a lot of good information that was shared. For the most part, they had a lot of community support. They had a couple of instances where 3 gentlemen in particular. Now, I'm going to back up and I'm gonna add something to this. And again, it's one of those situations where I'm of 2 different minds. On the one hand, I've got 2 different feelings, and it's kind of difficult to reconcile the 2 of them. Because of that vigilante group that we were discussing earlier and a lot of their talks about wanting to harm protesters, I did not bring myself or my son because I didn't feel like I could guarantee his safety. And that bothers me as a person because I feel like the reason that they're violent like that is to stifle people's voices, and by not going, it worked. And I never wanted to be that person. But on the other hand, as a parent, I have an obligation to maintain the safety of my child. So, like I said, 2 minds. But Elizabeth is an adult. She's capable of making her own decisions. Even if she wasn't a young adult, if she was an older teen, I probably would have allowed her to go. We raised her. I should trust that we raised her right, and that she can make decisions and ensure her own safety. And if she can't, well, again, I guess that's because we sucked as parents and we failed. Anyway.
There are awful people in the world. You can't keep them from everything.
So they went, And like I said, they were talking about running over protesters. There was a couple of guys there from that group. I'm assuming have
But that's
not.
pretty easy though. They were laying down in the road.
She was not, but yes, some were.
Oh, you'll see it in the video clip. They were
Yes.
laying down in the road.
Now, one of the things that I don't know if they caught on the video, Elizabeth was saying that the person who organized that, and I think it lasted, how long did it last? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? They said the intent was not to stop traffic. That's why they were in the turn lane. The intent was not to stop traffic. The intent was just to slow traffic. I get really ragey when I'm detained in traffic. That's because I don't time manage well. And usually I've left with negative time to get to wherever it is that I'm going. So, I admit that's a personal fault. I don't know that I agree with traffic alterations. I'm still evaluating how I feel. But ultimately, again, I don't know that how I feel about that is relevant to the global conversation. So it's just like a personal thing. Anyway, there was a couple of gentlemen who were revving their engines, basically making sure people knew that they had their cars and they were trying to be purposely threatening with the cars. They started racing down the road to intimidate protesters. Well, the light changed and they got stuck there on the corner. And she said they all just kind of went and just stood at him and stared at him from the sidewalk, just like, well, you dumbass. Now he's stuck there. Looking at you. I found that personally amusing. Anyway, aside from that, she said there was a lot of positive energy and she felt good. I am again conflicted. On the one hand, I feel really good that my child gets to be an agent for positive change in the world, but I am also saddened that it needs to happen.
How is this going to lead to positive change?
I have a couple of opinions on how that'll happen. How it actually bears out is probably left to be seen. The number one thing I think is that it's making the conversation happen. Like I was saying earlier about you can't just let a wound fester, you have to drain it. A lot of people have this idea that since it's not comfortable to talk about, you shouldn't have to talk about it, and I think that's why stuff continues to happen. And I think now that the conversation has gone global and has gone national and has gone global, that, in my opinion, is the strongest agent for change. It's because conversations are happening.
Do you think that some of these gatherings, riots, and looting and stuff like that, do you think the riot and looting is going to hinder the conversation and real change?
I think it will.
And
Sorry.
part two of that would be, if it does, would it be caused, the rioting and looting, would that then somehow be caused by people who don't want us to have the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixed bag. I think some of the rioting and looting is the genuine eruption of powerful emotions, and I think some of the rioting and looting is groups that are happy with the status quo who want to delegitimize the movement.
Okay. Because I mean, that's where I'm at. I think that there's a part of it that is being done and fronted by those who don't want us to have the conversation at all, ever, and to keep everything the way it is now. And that's exactly what they want.
Yeah, I think so.
Nothing more than to keep everything going exactly the way it was.
Change is scary, and I'm willing to say I'm hoping that most of the resistance to having the conversation is fear, because I feel like fear can be handled, and that once it's handled, you can be a better person for it. Malice, I think there's a lot of malice that grows out of fear, but that's something that can be resolved. But malice for the point of malice, I don't think that there's anything that you can do with that. And I would hate to say that there's somebody who's just a lost cause. I'd like to think that everybody can be redeemed. But if you want to hurt people just to hurt them, I don't know that that's the case anymore.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add in closing?
It's okay to be upset. It's okay to not know how you should feel. And it's okay to feel multiple different ways about the same thing and to still be conflicted about that. I've tried to be very open about how I feel about everything that's going on, and to point out at least a couple of the instances where I have feelings that are not easily reconcilable because they are opposite of each other. And I just want everybody to know that that's okay. It is okay to feel like that. That's normal. That's acceptable. As you can see, I'm exhausted. I know I look like crap. You can probably tell that I'm freaking tired. The entire time period has been emotionally wrenching. I have friends who are they're emotionally distraught. They're much closer to what's going on than I am. They're terrified. I have friends who sometimes feel like they can't talk about what's happening. I try to be there for them, but then that's also draining on you. Also, I have dropped family members off of my Facebook, and I felt bad about it. But I was like, if somebody came into my home and started spouting white nationalist stuff at me, I would kick them out. So why stay on my Facebook? I'm sad that it had to come to that, but I'm not in a place emotionally where I feel strong enough to deal with your shit and also mine. So maybe later. I think in closing, this is an emotional time for everybody, and don't feel like you can't embrace that and handle it.
Okay. Well, in closing, I'll give my part. I don't think that anything positive has ever come from looting and rioting. It does nothing but hurt the communities from where you are needing change and where everything is coming ahead, and boiling over. Going back to the 1960s here in America and with the Watts race riots and looting and burning of the communities, no one has ever come in and infused money into the community or help into those communities. They're still as battered as they were from the 1960s. You look at every other one that has ever taken place anywhere in the world, it's never led to change. What has led to change was what Martin Luther King Jr. wanted nothing more, was non-confrontational, peaceful protesting. And why, as in the world, that people have not embraced yet today, the words and the wisdom of Martin Luther King, is beyond me. Yes, racism sucks. We need to get rid of racism. But every moment that we ignore it and we push it aside, the stronger it grows against us. So, and one last thing, blue lives matter. Every life matters. I'm not downplaying anyone's, black lives matter or white or Chinese lives matter. All lives matter. But, don't hate the police just because of what 4 racist pricks did. There are a lot of good officers out there who risk their lives every single day to keep you and me and your families and my family safe. Blue lives matter.
Oh, I like butterflies.
She likes butterflies.
Butterflies are pretty.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. You stay safe out there.